Okay. Hey, welcome. So, this time around, we are talking about how roughly transformers work. Um, we're going to be getting into more or less how the information from a an AI chat app, including OpenAI's own chat app, it's a website just like any other website, roughly how it functions and how your text conversations somehow get wadded up and sent across the internet and become chats with this huge language model that we've been talking about. So the there's a basic structure we'll do today. It'll be two parts. Let me go ahead and switch to a scene with more information. Okay, so we'll talk about everything here in a minute. Just this is the unit on how transformers work, and or also known as how that ding ding computer speaking good smart words at me ain't making no sense. I tell you. So the idea is you've already seen why this is such a wild possibility, and you've seen some interesting ways to make use of the models. Now we're going to talk about how this works, and also in so doing a little bit more like why this works. So two parts today. First, we're going to talk a little bit about AI chat app structure, so how information in an AI chat app gets from the front end to where it's going to be processed by this large language model, just so you kind of understand the business logic of how these tools all are playing the same game, right? A lot of these things are all using the same large language model, so understanding how the data flows is going to be important. So first, we'll talk about the data involved in an AI chat. So we'll just talk about, like, you've had an AI chat before. I'll show you what the data formats look like. Um, these are just some notes I'll publish later. Also, we could be looking over here. This is a markdown file, so it renders nicely. And then the second thing we'll do is actually look at the logical flow of data as it moves to GPT-4 for my specific app, Cogmate. So we'll follow on a graph there. The next part will be a video explainer companion, where I'm going to show you a much better video than anything I could produce by the YouTube creator 3Blue1Brown. It's an extension to his existing machine learning series, and it just came out like last week. So it's a visual guide to how transformers do this crazy stuff that they do. And I'm going to be there to add some extra details and, pause at the chapter breaks to add extra details, talk about, the clarifications that might be useful or useful ways to think about some things, just sort of dovetailing with the work he's done. His visual explanations are top tier. It's really incredible. So I'm really happy to be presenting his work. It's great. So, okay. Let's get into here a chat. You see Cogmate over here, our friendo, and we've had a very simple chat with it. Now, it's a little crowded right now because of all the interface. You can see I've given it a custom prompt just for the sake of having an extremely short chat for an illustration. And it has no yapping, keep answers very short, similar length to the users, unless generating something technical. That's just like, this is the thing that it always has at the top of its context window. So when you send information to the AI, you're sending all the conversation you have here, like, hey, hello, can you sketch the JSON schema for OpenAI /chat API? Just the JSON blob is fine. And it's I'm asking it essentially, do you know how your own data objects look when they come in? This is not something you need to pay attention to yet. I'm just doing this to be cheeky and have a conversation about itself because I can't help myself. So this is the basis for the chat, and so this is like sort of the rules of the chat. You can mess with custom prompts yourself. It's really powerful stuff. But I'm going to close this tray and back to the top. So what is this conversation so far? Hey, hello, can you sketch the JSON schema for your own, API? What should be in there? Oh, you'll need to define the model. You got to give me messages with some list of objects that have a role and some content. There's other parameters you can set, like temperature for random. Okay, great. Cool. Now can you write the JSON schema for this conversation? And so I had it do that. I had it write the schema out for this exact conversation. So let's jump right to that in an actual browser, not browser, but the VS Code editor, to show you what this looks like. This is a data object. Oh, why are you indented funny? I think I failed an indent. Let me help it out. I think I can shift tab that. Great. Okay, so looking good. This is. We can close the notes for now. This is essentially the data form of the conversation we've had over here. Now, I do continue this conversation to do some other things that you'll see in a second. But for now, up to this point, up to the point of me asking it to generate this, this is what the conversation was the second I sent it to, hit the send button to say, hey, generate me more text, right? So what it includes is the model we're using to GPT-4 Turbo Preview. It includes the temperature because I do have that set in the settings to 0.7 by default. And it has an array of messages. We have it's a bunch of objects here. So curly brace means object or dictionary, just like, named variables, right? So the brackets mean this is just like a list, a repeating list. This means a specific structure. So the structure of a message is you define the role and then you say, what's the content? Now, this is all really simple, but the point is that this is the JSON object that we use to send directly to OpenAI, right? So for processing. So this is what a conversation looks like in terms of the data. You have the user going back and forth with the assistant. The content is just whatever is generated and or what the user sends each time. So this last time I sent, cool. Now can you write the JSON schema for this conversation? I gave it some things about the parameters and it generated this, right? Fun, ha ha ha. You might be used to seeing chats in the form that I've had involved in Cogmate for a while, which is this text file. Same data, same underlying structure, but just recreated from the data file. Now this is a text file, so I've done a bunch of formatting, left these big barriers between things to try and help. Honestly, they look kind of ugly. I need to fix that. It's a little misleading to the eye, but it kind of gives the impression of it's pages, right? Oh, here's the human section, here's the AI section, blah blah blah. And another version of this that I asked for right afterward is a markdown version, which again, I'm only doing this to illustrate that the data that we're sending can be reflected in a lot of different ways. It can be reflected as the interface over here is rendering all of our beautiful little conversation bubbles. It can be reflected as the actual JSON file that sort of more closely maps to the actual data structures underneath. It can be mapped to this text file I output, or it can be mapped to a little bit better preview, a previewable markdown file. And so here again, you see the same conversation, right? System, no yapping, keep answers very short. Hey, hello, can you sketch the JSON schema? And so it does. Right, and here we are again, showing off the entire conversation up to that point. So that's just to sort of prime you on the idea that this is the conversations you're having are just a bunch of text, but there's a bit of structure to it, right? You have I send text, but we need to make sure that we delineate that that's me, the user, is sending the text. We have which model we're using here, and it sends text back, right? It sends text back, and we get it at the front end, and then we see, oh, cool, it's actually responding to me, right? So that's the idea of the data. So let's move from that into my my sort of flow diagram of how this all works. So let me clicky. Get out of the way. Get out of the way, interface. So, how does this work specifically in cogmate.app, right? My little buddy. here's the sort of the order of events. We'll get rid of this mask in a minute and show the more detailed information under the hood. But this is the event timeline. The user presses the send button, obviously after they have like entered some kind of text into the interface. The message strings get arranged into a data object in just the right way. That message is sent to the app's backend server. So this is still something that I am in control of. This is Cogmate.app. This is where it lives on the Google Cloud. And then that gets reformatted and reshaped into everything needed for the actual full OpenAI call. On top of everything else, this is where I add my API key so that you are spending my money and not your own, right? I'm the one footing the bill for these calls that you're making. So this is where I am able to jump in and say, all right, this one's on me. So from here, we have our method of payment because, of course, they are not doing this for free. We have the conversation that you are sending, the actual conversation text, and you have some other parameters that are going to get there with like defining which model are we actually talking to and other small things. So this request object gets sent to OpenAI, and then they catch it, and we don't know exactly what they do with it, but at some point they send it off to GPT itself, like the transformer like not the architecture, but like the things that are running GPT right now, the server farms that are running GPT for inference, right? So OpenAI catches whatever we're sending, and it parses it all out. It makes a note of, okay, you're about to process this many tokens. I'll bill you this, and then here we go. So now it goes to GPT, and finally, as GPT finally encodes it all, we get to a place where it's going to respond with a bunch of the tokens. We've seen the way GPT talks. It's always sending back one token at a time, boop, 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 right? So this part loops quite a lot. I just have it ending here, but this is what then goes back to Cogmate front end, and you see coming in all of the inferred tokens that GPT is working with. So let's do a dramatic reveal. Oh man, here it comes. Here's the full pipeline. Boom. Oh my God, there's so much to look at. So we'll take it slow. Don't worry. Oop, scrolled up. I meant to zoom in. So here's Cogmate, right? We are aware of our friend Cogmate. This is the web app interface that you're kind of used to seeing, right? It's built with Vue, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I will publish this whole thing. I'm not going to necessarily dig into every detail. So Cogmate.app, here's the hey, sup, I got a question, shoot. Do you think if you walked through a car wash, you'd die? I don't know. I asked the robot because I wanted to see what it would say. I actually didn't ever finally send that. Well, we can, as a little treat, we'll do that at the end. So web app interface is here. This is what we are experiencing when we have Cogmate available. Let's see if I can go snag. I can copy our little friend over. And yeah, we can make you. Okay, so do you think if you walked through a car wash, you'd die? No, but 0 out of 10 would not recommend. All right, it's still on the no yapping, very short. That's a pretty funny answer. So this is the interface, right? And what did we just do? We did this whole process. We just did this entire process. But let's walk through how it works, right? So we have a little conversation history. I didn't. I only had one message, but the idea is you have some kind of conversation history, and you have your final message. That right away gets parsed into, as soon as you hit send, before this information leaves the front end, we're bundling up into a simple little message array object. I'm fudging this a little bit. I'm actually a little smarter about how I handle the object structure with Cogmate proper, but this is about, I have a little disclaimer here. about that. But it's really, I'm just trying to illustrate how this stuff can transform as it goes. So we could just send a super simple little blob like this. It's still JSON. It's still a data object, right? But it's really just a list of strings. It's the first string, user hey, second string, AI with electrospace sup, blah, 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 right? So we have this list of 5 strings that represents the conversation. This is what gets bundled up and tossed over to the Cogmate backend. Remember, this is still my code. This is still where my stuff is living. So this is my web app server. It's built on Fast API. The front end is built with Vue 3, in case you're curious. Fast API, it's a Python backend. And it's running on the same Google Compute engine. Like, this is all on my little free Google Compute engine that sometimes it goes down and I have to reboot it manually, which that's going to happen, but it's funny. So not a whole lot is going on here, but a few things that do happen. And again, this is a little bit of an idealized version just to make it seem more like cut and dried, is now we're going to fill in, not, beyond just the text that we got from the conversation chain, we're now going to send, which model to use, what temperature to use. It'll reformat the strings into the proper structures that we just saw before. And it also adds my API key, right? The thing that tells them who is asking for this, so they know who to take money from. So this, again, so my backend catches the stuff from the front end, and it does all the little work, and it fills in my secret important information and stuff. And then we bundle this up into the OpenAI request object. This is that schema that the robot was talking about before. I can jump back to and just show you the schema that it printed. Right, so this is the schema for, more or less the schema for OpenAI's API. Remember, we're talking about how do I bundle up information in a nice objecty way that's going to make it easy for systems to read them. I have a system that catches an API send from the front end, but then we also send one off to OpenAI. It's a lot. That's the deal with APIs, right? So what does it need? What does it need to be valid? Well, some of these are actually optional because it'll default to natural things. The things that we're concerned with are temperature, because we want to have that's controlled by the interface, and we have what model we're using. So we're using GPT-4 Turbo, right? And then the conversation, which, as we've talked about, you're defining for each of those objects is a role and some kind of content. So back to, here we are. And that's what happens here, right? That's what my backend server that's running, spinning away in the cloud right now, that's what it's doing. Whenever you send a message to Cogmate, it catches that first, volley of messages, and then it turns them into the right shape that OpenAI needs to process our request. So now that's when we actually send the request off to OpenAI. It's almost instant. This is not like a long process. It's just text, right? You're just chunking one chunk of text into a different chunk of text. But it's still an important step, right? This is where I add my user secrets and stuff, my passwordy type things. So now we're on OpenAI's servers, and this is kind of like what we know from the outside. They have API endpoints. They have their chat endpoint, which is the one that we just looked at, right? That's the schema. So they take our JSON request. They do whatever processing they do beforehand. I don't know what they do. We don't have access to that kind of thing, but it sends it right along to GPT-4 to perform the inference, right, of predicting each token one at a time. So now, finally, GPT-4 Turbo Preview, the one that we tend to use, that's the current going model, right? This will now finally process our conversation. So to highlight something here, it doesn't know anything about you, right? It doesn't receive anything except exactly what you put in the data object. GPT-4 and all of these transformers are what's known as stateless, and the hint there is that they're pre-trained, right? They don't adapt new stuff from you. The thing that they do is they take the conversation context, so all of the information that we've had in the conversation up to this point, and with a system prompt, right? If we go back and pop open the system prompt, which can actually be very loaded with good information when you do certain types of patterns here. But so the idea is, it is stateless. It is like, I've used this before, it's like a game of chess. There is no hidden information. It doesn't have a secret back knowledge of who's been talking to it. It can't. It just takes the raw text conversation you're having and the prompting at the top, and it turns it into the next message it wants to send, right? Now, how it does that is the focus of the next video. But ultimately, what it's doing is it's taking the text, it's chopping it up into the right token shapes, and it's doing a whole bunch of embedding stuff to make, like, get semantic knowledge out of them. Again, we'll talk about it in the next video. Ultimately, what it does, though, is one at a time, it picks the most likely next token, like little chunk of a word, or maybe a whole word, to send back to the front end when you hear the right, when it's talking to you. It's picking one token at a time to send back to the front end that is the most likely, not just given like raw flat likelihood, but given like the kind of smartly determined likelihood, right? So we'll dig in deeper soon. But that token is then sent back. Actually, my backend does catch the token first, but then it sends it right onto the front end, right? So that is the full conversation loop. It's the ability to have a conversation on a little front end in my web app, wad that up into some kind of data form, throw it at my backend. My backend fills out the rest of the important details of the API call, and then it sends it on. And then finally, GPT gets a hold of the data we're trying to have it process, and sends one token at a time back to us. Yeah, it's a pretty cool space. So I think a big thing I didn't note down here, and maybe I'll just add it later, but is that idea I was talking about. GPT, all these models, they're stateless. They are not adapting new things from you. They are, the owners of them might be fine-tuning them continuously, but they tend to talk about that kind of thing. So the key thing is that this means that your conversation history is the only extension in time that is ever sent to the AI. So, it doesn't remember which user logged in. It doesn't have a history with you. You can build those things, and that's some of the AI, the work that goes on in AI app development these days, is building like an entity memory to stuff into the system prompt. Like, oh, this person is someone who does this, this, and this, and they have talked to you before about this, this, and this, right? Small bits of ways to remind the model of things that it doesn't, it has no memory of, and it never will. But you can, using the context window available to you, the amount of text that you can send to the model, you can give it quite a lot of information that will help it zero in on your needs. And that's where adding more detail to a conversation is the organic way to do that. But there's also the way to do it in the front, where you're, say, filling that system prompt with useful tidbits that you've accumulated from other sources in your projects. So yeah, that's the idea. This is how we talk to, I'm not going to it's too small to read, I'm sure, but that's how we talk to GPT-4 by way of Cogmate. It's this data transformation process. It's actually ultimately kind of straightforward. And now you could almost say the same about the processing of GPT, but it takes a lot more knowledge. So we'll look at that one next time. And I think that, I think we're good to go. Thanks for coming along.